With that, let us go ahead and start our next section, which is Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson's nomination process. Get that marked. All right. So now Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson sat through 3 days of questions for her Supreme Court confirmation hearings, and the line of questioning followed what we anticipated. As we reported last week, Senator Hawley opened his questions with allegations of Jackson being too lenient on pedophiles. The implication of these questions is clear: to tarnish her reputation as judge by accusing her of being one herself. It is a "won't someone think of the children" on steroids. Now, as we reported, much of these statements were without context and are outright lies. Many of the comments Hawley pulled from court transcripts were, as we reported really before anyone else, honestly, asked in response to lawyers while seeking clarity, and have been widely covered in the press since we reported. Now, one thing that we do want to highlight here is that her sentencing of convicted pedophiles was entirely in line with the prevailing wisdom of judges across the political spectrum. Senator Hawley and Senator Graham tried to make hay over the fact that she gave sentences that were less than what prosecutors requested. However, according to the United States Sentencing Commission, However, according to a United States Sentencing Commission report published in 2021, only 30% of non-production child porn offenders received a sentence within those guidelines. Quote from the report states that the non-production child pornography guideline has been subject to long-standing criticism from stakeholders and has one of the lowest rates within guideline range sentences each year. In a similar vein now, Republicans badgered her on her beliefs and opinions on critical race theory. As we've stated on the program before, CRT for Republicans really is just a stand-in for every social policy that they don't like. They've weaponized the term to be used against anything that can be labeled as social justice. These things include LGBT rights, intersectionality, redressing past wrongs with policy in the present from both personal or from private and governmental levels, diversity training, etc. Some have even gone as far as to include discussing the racist history of the United States because it may, quote, make kids feel bad. Many of these questions were thinly veiled attacks on her character and her ability to administer justice fairly. One such instance on Tuesday involved Ted Cruz directly asking her about whether she followed CRT and if she believed CRT was taught in schools. After she said no to both questions, he repositioned his line of questioning into a direct attack on her work as a board member of the private school General Brown Central School District, a school that has, since its founding, has cared about social justice initiatives. And finally, Republicans tried to focus on her record of being too lenient to convicted criminals and her record as a public defender in general. Let's watch one such exchange now.
Congressman Jim Clyburn was a strong supporter of Michelle Childs and now supporting your nomination. And Michelle Childs has been nominated by President Biden, current $1 million incarcerated.
Oh, is this the wrong?
At Florence College in the United
States. Somebody is wrong. There's a direct.
All right, sorry, I just had to fast forward a bit. All right, let's go ahead and rewind. There we go.
With the beginning of the Obama administration, the recidivism rate of Guantanamo detainees released is 5%.
Mr. Chairman.
Now, see, the recidivism rate here should be stated what it actually means. Recidivism means the propensity to offend again once being released from prison. The general recidivism rate in the United States is upwards of 30%, depending on the crime. It being 5% here for Guantanamo Bay detainees is actually phenomenal given the actions the United States government has done to these people without trial. That needs to be emphasized here. None of the people in Guantanamo Bay have actually had a fair trial. There have been some things where they have had these military tribunals and have gone before a judge in those kind of circumstances, but these are quasi-paramilitary justice whatever that is not constitutionally sound. So if you care about the Constitution, you should be against what is happening to the people at Gitmo. But let's listen to Lindsey Graham go off about everything that's going on here.
Chairman, according to the Department Director of National Intelligence, is 31%. Somebody is wrong here. If you're going to talk about what I said, I'm going to respond to what you said. If we close Gitmo and move them to Colorado, do you support indefinite detention under the law of war for these detainees?
I would just say I'm giving the facts, and
The answer is no.
I want to make sure that it's clear.
No one should support indefinite detention under the rule of war because these people are not prisoners of war. They are prisoners of a terrorist organization and need to be treated as criminals for what they are. Not only that, the rules of war, indefinite detention, is abhorrent in its own nature and also against the Constitution proper. Let's continue, though.
31% you referred to goes back to the year 2009.
And look, I mean, can we just talk about how her facial expression here is just saying everything right now? She's really looking at Senator Graham and be like, "Are you fucking kidding me right now? Are you really going to say that you wanted to support indefinite detention as an American? Come on."
2000.
What does it matter when it goes back to we had them and they got loose and they started killing people?
Well, I could just say that
if you're one of the people killed in 2005, does it matter to you when we release them?
Suggest that a president of your own party released him in.
I'm suggesting the system has failed miserably, and advocates to change this system, like she was advocating, would destroy our ability to protect this country. We're at war. We're not fighting a crime.
No, you're fighting crime. Just because you call it the war on terror doesn't mean it's not criminal. They're not a government organization. They are a criminal enterprise. Criminal enterprise that happens to have a political belief system or a religious one, depending on how you want to cut, slice, and dice this. It doesn't matter.
This is not some passage of time event. As long as they're dangerous, I hope they all die in jail if they're going to go back and kill Americans. It won't bother me one bit if 39 of them die in prison. That's a better outcome than letting them go. And if it costs $500 million to keep them in jail, keep them in jail because they're going to go back to the fight. Look at the friggin' Afghan.
They're going to go back to the fight. Some of these people weren't even involved in the fight in the first place, and we've created terrorists by our policies that have created Gitmo in the fucking first place. This is seriously abhorrent, and I'm hoping more Republicans understand that.
And government is made up of former detainees at Gitmo. This whole thing by the left about this war ain't working.
Let me also note that Larry Thompson, who served as Deputy Attorney General under President George W. Bush.
Oh, he stormed off. What a baby.
Orrin Kerr, Special Counsel. Viet Den, who served as Assistant Attorney General for Legal Policy in the George W. Bush administration. John Bellinger, and former D.C. Circuit Judge, Solicitor General, and Independent Counsel Ken Starr were also prominent conservative lawyers signing a letter defending attorneys who represented Guantanamo Bay detainees.
All right, so enough of that particular video. It's really galling to me here that we are even having this discussion. They are essentially saying, they being Republicans here, because it's only Republicans making these statements, maybe some libertarians that are just embarrassed Republicans making these statements, that they are saying that essentially if a person is a public defender, something that is written into our Constitution, that has been created in order to serve people and ensure that their constitutionally protected rights are actually protected, should never serve in politics. They should just go off somewhere and just fade into the night, never to be heard from again in the political sphere, because it doesn't match what they, big bads, want it to match. That's disgusting. Now, but that's what I want to say about that particular point, because there's more. There's always more with this things. Now, probably one of the most odd things about the hearing are what some Republicans said outside of them. One such incident involved Senator Mike Braun from Indiana. We're going to watch that segment now.
So you would be okay with the Supreme Court leaving the question of interracial marriage to the states?
Yes, I think that's something that
To reiterate this, I'm going to rewind it here for a second. To reiterate, they're talking about Loving versus Virginia that allowed interracial couples to exist legally. He believes that a lot of these things should be left to the states, and so he's going to bite the bullet on this one and say, oh, it's got to go too.
I think that that's something that if you're not wanting the Supreme Court to weigh in on issues like that, you're not going to be able to have your cake and eat it too. I think that's hypocritical.
What about Griswold versus Connecticut?
Well, you can list a whole host of issues. When it comes down to whatever they are, I'm going to say that they're not going to all make you happy within a given state, but that we're better off having states manifest their points of view rather than homogenizing it across the country as Roe versus Wade did.
No. Constitutionally protected rights are necessary to ensure that people are treated fairly across the 50 states, and homogenizing rights is the correct thing to do. Now, before I continue on with this, I do want to get Soyaddle's comment in on here because I thought it's pretty funny. So Lindsey Graham had to virtual signal on Law & Order in order to distance himself from Matt Gaetz. Now, for those who may not know, Matt Gaetz is embroiled in a human trafficking scandal involving a two-bit tax lawyer creating fake IDs for underage women and for underage girls. And so maybe that's why they're actually all on this anti-pedo stance, because they're caught up in it. And doth thou protest too much? I'm not going to say they do, but it could be part of it. All right, continuing on. Now, if it wasn't clear on this clip, Braun has essentially retreated into states' rights to the point of saying that people like my wife and I should not have the right to marry in all 50 states in an effort to preserve a perverse form of federalism. I thought Republicans didn't like big government. I guess that is just limited to the federal government. Basically, he can go fuck himself. States' rights don't trump human rights, sir, and your walk back is pathetic. And then there's Senator Marsha Blackburn from the state of Tennessee, also a Republican. In a video released prior to the hearing...
You would be okay with the Supreme Court?
Sorry about that. In a video released prior to the hearing, she questioned whether Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson would follow the Constitution or treat it as a living document. But ever so subtly, she slipped in big Republican cultural talking points in there as well. Let's watch that video, starting in about 1 minute and 45 seconds into it.
Here in this...
Oh no. I gotta reload the page. I hate these things so much sometimes. Sorry about that. I had it loaded and everything, and of course when I hit play, it didn't want to load again. Alright, so 1 minute and 38 seconds. 1 minute and 35 seconds. Play it.
The result you want. The chaos that ensues when the court abandons the Constitution and kicks at moving goalposts doesn't really matter to them, but it should. Constitutionally unsound rulings like Griswold versus Connecticut, Kelo versus City of New London, and NFIB versus Sebelius confused Tennesseans and left Congress wondering who gave the court permission to bypass our system of checks and balances.
The court did, back in Mulberry versus Madison. Maybe you need to study the Constitution a bit more. Just saying.
It is the 11th hour, and where Judge Jackson stands on the Constitution remains a secret.
Yeah, that's not true. But that is what I wanted to reveal from her statement here. Now, to bring attention to these points, though, Griswold versus Connecticut is what established the right for married couples to use medical birth control under a right of privacy. This has been covered a lot by the news, but we want to bring special emphasis to it. Without this decision, states could still make it illegal for you to use the pill. Now, in Kelo versus New London, that particular lawsuit dealt with public use and eminent domain, where the justices found that the term public use was not literal. used by the public, but instead the more commonly interpretation of for public benefit. And the National Federation of Independent Businesses, or NFIB, versus Sebelius allowed the Affordable Care Act to stand. Now, oddly enough here, though, and honestly something that has been missed by much of the press, is the fact that Judge Jackson seems to be firmly in their camp from a judicial philosophy perspective. Blackburn's video largely questioned whether or not Judge Jackson would be an originalist and perhaps even a textualist. To put these two legal theories simply, originalism states that a law must be interpreted according to the meaning that Congress intended when they passed the law. This is inferred through a variety of ways: floor debates, documents, diaries, depending on how far back you go, etc. Now, textualism, for its part, serves as sort of an extra check on original intent sometimes. And that is based, and what it does is that it looks at the plain meaning of the words in the text of the law. Generally speaking, if there isn't enough historical context to infer or directly understand the original intent of the law, then a judge should default to the plain English text of the law itself. This is what Scalia would say, and he would be proud of what Jackson had done in her confirmation hearing. Now, you can be a textualist without being an originalist. Gorsuch is one of those type of people. And basically, if the law isn't written in such a way that it's easily understood, then you have to default to the way that it is written, and it is up to Congress to correct that error. The courts can only look at it and say, this is what the plain meaning of the text is. This is what people will interpret the law to do. This is what people assume the law is. And therefore, if this is not the intent of Congress, then the law needs to be corrected by Congress. Now, I want to pontificate on this for a little bit here. So what we are seeing is no surprise. We even said that we would see it last week during our last news roundup. Again, 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time till 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on Thursdays. What we're seeing is a lot of telegraphing of what we can expect to see coming into the 2022 congressional elections, the midterm elections. Republicans are going to hammer home on the cultural war issues that they have been talking about. They're going to hammer home on soft on crime measures. They're going to hammer home on whether or not the court itself should lean one way or the other. They are hoping to use these issues to rally their base to their cause and get them out to vote. Because when it comes to midterm elections, it is really about energizing the base. And typically speaking, the opposition party to the president is more energized than the presidential party. But as a kind of insurance check to that, they are going to play into these cultural war issues. This is why Senator Cruz asked Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson whether or not she understood of the book by X. Kendi of Anti-Racist Baby, or why they asked if these things are being taught in school or not. Because they know that their base is very geared and up in arms about these issues, which we will talk about later on in the program.